we do a lot of WAN networking for large customers. And several times we've been brought into issues where, we're getting blamed for having a slow WAN connection for our customers because, they're dealing with, and when we dig down into it, it's because they're dealing with some frontier model, excuse me, and the CFO limited the amount of tokens they can have in a day. So it would slow down and it would manifest itself as a network issue, yet it was not a network issue. It was the CFO cut what they were paying, and it was Anthropic in this case. So, and you see that Anthropic and others are actually, cutting down on the amount you can do in a certain interval. So I think a lot of it has to do with observability, and we've been pushing this with our customers from our network perspective. We're pushing the ability to observe all this traffic and report on it in real time.
Welcome to the Information Week Podcast. I'm your host, Senior Editor João Pierre Ruth. Today's episode, we are looking at whether or not organizations are seeing a shortened or increased tech debt cycle while they're transforming with AI. Obviously, introducing AI is only part of the battle with it in an organization. These new systems must be reconciled with legacy data and systems that might not have been optimized to work with them. So the question is, does AI transformation mean smooth sailing into a new direction for a company, or could there be rough waters ahead? Or maybe not rough waters, but a little choppy waters along the way. Today's episode, we are joined by Gourav Pani, Chief Business Officer for GoDaddy. Gourav, good to be seeing you.
Thank you, JP. Nice to be here.
And we're also joined by Eddie Fox, CTO for MetTel. Eddie, good to be seeing you as well.
Nice to see you as well, JP. Thanks for the invite.
Okay, great. All right, Eddie, Gourav. All right, so let's talk about some of the early things that might come into play with AI transformation that you may have seen with your teams. What kind of decisions have you and your teams need to make regarding modernizing what legacy systems that you've had to work with AI, or finding ways to wrap them around AI as have been introducing them, or maybe looking to introduce them into your organizations? Eddie, why don't you kick us off with your thoughts?
Yeah, I'd love to. One of the places that we've been using quote unquote AI for quite some time now is we started back in 2016 when it was, less sexy, and it was called machine learning. And really we introduced some AI into our network. And what we did was actually, we trained a few different machine learning models on our incident tickets for the network. And quickly learned that we needed better information from our network. So from a technical debt perspective, it forced us to actually go and build a whole new data stream and data lake, and actually normalize where we were keeping all of our network information. So that was a pretty huge undertaking. That took us about a year. But ultimately, we ended up with an engine that we call now our intelligent platform automation. And it's kind of a mix of a bunch of machine learning algorithms and a lot of automation. And now it kind of has agents that speak to each piece of our network and bring information in and will act on information from the network immediately, but it also brings it to the platform that brings in our incident management ticket system. So it's constantly reading through incidents and figuring out it's kind of like I call it an angel on all of our analysts' shoulders, because it'll take an incident away from someone and give it to someone else, or it will actually go out and say, oh, this is fixed. Let me close the ticket and alert everyone so you don't have to worry about it, or go out and take action within the network itself. So I think, right now that I kind of view that it's still working great for us. But at some point that becomes, some point in the next 2 years, that becomes technical debt when we move into the autonomous network automation that, we're seeing from a lot of different vendors these days. So I guess that's a pretty good example of, how it affects both, really.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Thank you for that. Gaurav, how's it been working out for you and your team at GoDaddy?
Well, just like Eddie mentioned, it's been well over a decade that we've been using machine learning to make decisions on one of the most primary functions that our company is known for, which is providing domain results. And so that has always been the bread and butter of our company. And over time, our machine learning algorithms have just gotten better, and how we use the mounds and mounds of data that we collect has become easier with AI. Obviously, that is a customer-facing scenario for us, but then even internally, things like how do we deploy capital towards advertising, paid advertising on Google, Meta, etc. That has been algorithmic using machine learning for several years, and we've just gotten better at it and more efficient. And more recently, all of our pricing decisions, instead of having people make decisions on how to price individual products and plans, every decision is being made with machine learning, with some sort of an objective function that we're maximizing for. Again, human decision making and biases get pulled out, and it just is very much a data-driven process. And then last but not the least, when we started with all of our products, we were in a world where customers would get a blank slate. They would start from scratch, whether you're building a website or you're hosting. And it's up to the customer's imagination to figure out what they want next. And what AI has done, at least from its nascent stages, it was able to do with generative AI, was to take away that blank slate problem. So what we did was we wrapped our legacy systems with content generation AI so that no customer would have to start with a blank slate, because that startup time, that cold start time, is what was taking people a long time to complete their job to be done. So those were, I'd say, between internal and external systems, how we've used machine learning to become better.
So let's talk a bit about how things have been different, particularly, for example, either of you, have you seen any kind of things like where you're sacrificing architecture flexibility for the sake of speed in the process? What have been some kind of functional differences by making use, by getting into this AI transformation space versus how you were operating before?
Yeah, so I could go first. So on our side, we've been going back and forth, and I guess ultimately, I think where we'll end up is, we've tried different frontier models, with RAG, into our databases, and then we've tried different, open weight models for different tasks. And I think what we've seen at the end of the day is, I think, as opposed to just rushing in with a frontier model, I think what we're learning is that we should be looking at what we want for an outcome and the sovereignty of the data that we're dealing with, and whether or not an open weight model makes much more sense to us than a frontier model. And I do think, I have the opportunity to visit with a lot of our customers, and I do think that a lot of the customers are seeing this as well, that a lot of our customers are talking about, the sovereignty of a model that you can just deploy within your network and put your guardrails around it in your space. But I think we're still all trying to figure that out. I'll give you a great example. We have a product that's called Single SIM, and it's basically a SIM that goes into a device and it'll pick the best carrier, whether that be Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile, US Cellular, or wherever you're traveling in the world. And we were able to build an open weight model in AWS that would gather all usage information and performance statistics from a database that we built from all of our customers' information. And we were able to instruct devices to change carriers as they were moving, because we know what carrier is the best. And we were able to do that in AWS in about 2 days. So the ability to do that very quickly is great, but then we kind of sat back and said, wait, what are we not thinking about here? Should we deploy this in AWS? Should we have it internal? So I think, we're still all trying to figure that out. And I think sometimes the speed of which we've made mistakes. And, I think in this marketplace, you have to you have to have the thick skin to go make those mistakes. And I think, I see Gourav smiling. I'm sure he's gone through the same thing. When we did machine learning 10, 13 years ago, we tried to get to a, 95, 99% success rate. But then we sat back and said, if it's 70% and it does it multiple times and iterates quickly, it's much better than a person regardless, because people make mistakes. So I think it's smart at this point to go as fast as you can, but know that at some point you got to put the stop on, step back, and think about the bigger picture.
Gourav, you seem like you've got input ready to share.
JP, it's like I was born and raised in the world of building platforms, and so I built my career on it. And it'll seem counterintuitive, but I've stopped believing in building long-term platforms, because obsolescence is just around the corner. And so what we tell our teams is to go fast. It's not dead, because you're just going to deconstruct it within 6 months anyway and build something that new. And just having that mental model to say, don't be in an analysis paralysis mode to build the most robust platform, and don't get encumbered by decision fatigue of debating what's better, is the best path forward. So build fast. And when you fail, which, as Eddie pointed out, be open to being out there and saying, we messed up. We made this decision. It was wrong. We can rectify it really fast, because we can build faster. And I think that has been the biggest unlock for us. Just this morning, I was telling one of our teams, I'm like, you should really be proud of what you're doing. They just introduced a multi-arm bandit experimentation framework into selection of different UIs for the website builder, which, by the way, the entire website builder is built on AI. But then how you decide what UI pattern a customer would prefer one over the other based on the vertical they're part of. Like, look at all these dimensions. We're just not delegating it to AI. We're actually getting reinforcement learning with feedback from the customer using a multi-arm bandit and making those choices. So it's AI plus reinforcement learning, two completely different systems working together, learning fast. And we are going to make mistakes. And by the way, these platforms that we built, literally built within the last 12 weeks. And it's in production, taking real customer traffic. And we know for a fact we're making mistakes, and we're changing it every single day. And I fundamentally believe that this platform will not exist in another 12 weeks. It'll be something different. So that rate of change and the willingness to say, not that the decision we're making right now is wrong, it's just that the decision we're going to make 12 weeks from now is going to be better. And as long as it's creating greater customer value at a rapid rate, we're willing to make those changes fast.
Speaking of making changes fast and potential for mistakes, of course, there's a question that the CFOs will probably be interested in, and that is the idea of cost with AI transformation. How do you determine, and Gourav, if you can start with this, how do you kind of determine whether or not you can really sustain the operational cost curve that comes with your AI transformation?
Certainly. I think the first thing that can take on a massive amount of cost is using the latest and greatest models. It seems super attractive to go after the best reasoning model or the best innovation that comes from AI providers, and then the token usage is really high. What we do is two things. Thing number one is everything goes into an experimentation bucket. So when you A/B test and you meter the exposure that you have to the latest model is controlled, you can control your costs. So that's thing number one. Thing number two is how we use tech. Caching is used extensively, and we believe that we see a lot of mainstream use cases get repeated, and there's no reason to send the same workload back to AI to solve the problem, and instead tap into caching, which has been the traditional way in which software has been more responsive on the internet for decades at this point. And last but not the least, it's very natural for teams to take deterministic jobs and send it to AI. And what we've said is, don't do that. If it's deterministic, just write a workflow the way we've been doing it old school. There's nothing wrong with doing that. And actually use AI to write that code. There are entire projects within our company where somewhere between 94 to 96% of the code is written by AI. And a lot of those are deterministic workflows. And when we do that, the short-term cost is that the code is being written by AI and there's token usage, and the CFO will say, okay, what's the utilization like? But in the long run, it's a deterministic workflow that doesn't go back to AI anymore. So the cost goes down to zero from an AI standpoint.
Yeah, so it's interesting that you bring this up because we do a lot of WAN networking for large customers, and several times we've been brought into issues where we're getting blamed for having a slow WAN connection for our customers because they're dealing with, and when we dig down into it, it's because they're dealing with some frontier model, excuse me. And the CFO limited the amount of tokens they can have in a day. So it would slow down and it would manifest itself as a network issue, yet it was not a network issue. It was the CFO cut what they were paying, and it was Anthropic in this case. So, and you see that in Anthropic and others are actually cutting down on the amount you can do in a certain interval. So I think a lot of it has to do with observability, and we've been pushing this with our customers from our network perspective. We're pushing the ability to observe all this traffic and report on it in real time, not only for making sure that your AI, you pay a lot for it, make sure it has giving the end users the best experience, but the most priority on the network as well as showing them where everyone's going. So I think that's a big part of it. And I also think, like I mentioned, that AWS model earlier, we developed that in AWS. We could do it really quickly. And then we thought, this is a network-based functionality that we're putting out there, and it's going to talk to hundreds of thousands of devices constantly. Is that the right place for it? Should we go open weight, put it in our data center? I think it's coming into it's happening real time for us, and I see it with customers as well, and we see it with our customers. But they'll come to us and say, "Man, my CFO and my CEO are really mad at me because I allowed our users to spend so much in tokens. Meanwhile, they don't know what's going through the network." So. We do something that's very old and very unsexy, telecom expense management and even utility expense management. I think there's going to be a time very shortly where being asked by our customers, because we can see it on the network, token expense management. I think that's going to end up being a thing pretty soon here.
It actually does, lead us into a next question, essentially knowing what's going on for both of you. Who owns the AI governance yet and accountability as you're making things happen? Eddie, you already sort of given me a bit of an example of being aware of things. So where does that start? Who's going to be accountable as things move forward through your transformation?
Yeah, so it's funny. I mentioned that case where the network was being blamed for the CFO not paying for enough tokens or cutting down the amount of tokens in a day. I think it's the old, and Gourav will probably laugh at this. It's the old, network versus developers, right? Your network stinks or your application really stinks, but that back and forth. I think we're in that again, and we're seeing it with AI. And if you can't observe it at the network layer, you're going to have some problems. So I think the owner becomes the one who gets blamed in any enterprise. In ours, I own our network. And basically for our customers. And then I have a colleague on the corporate side that for all of our corporate AI initiatives, we speak together and we try to strategize to make sure we're using the appropriate platforms. But, he's got that side of the house. So when anything happens on, like our frontier models that work within our platform, he owns that. So I think it's kind of, it's not everyone thinks it's the development team and the technology guy, but it's also the network people too. Like I said, very analogous to the the last 30 years of it's the network, it's the application, pointing the fingers. So it's very interesting.
For us, we look at it through three different dimensions. There's always the governance of usage, as Eddie mentioned, but in addition to that, we have the governance of quality, the quality of service that we're providing to the customer, and then the governance of security and safety of information. So I'll start with the last one. We have a mode called secure data model. One of the reasons why people were reticent to use AI early when we went on our journey towards generative AI was the leakage of PII data or any secure data to models. And so what we did was we built a facade around our gateway, the gateway that communicates with all of the outbound LLM providers, that actually scrubs out any data that needs to be governed within the company. And so that gave teams the assurance to say we can actually make queries with sensitive data, knowing that there's a secure data mode that will suppress the leakage of that type of information. So that was thing number one in terms of security. The second one is on quality of feedback and response. We have a framework that does evaluation of the quality of output that we provide to customers. And it's constantly, and right now we're trying to get it into a constant testing mode so that we can see whether the combination of a prompt, an agent, and a model is leading to the right outcomes for our customers. Obviously, we get qualitative feedback from our customers too on what they liked and didn't like. We get transcripts from calls when they call into our customer care. All of those get piped back into a model that says, what's the sentiment, general sentiment around a feature or a product. So that's thing number two. And then, of course, the governance of usage of tokens and usage of AI credits. We have a single gateway through which we call GoCas that actually governs all the different teams that are using AI within the company. And so every single team, every project actually has its own token, and we can monitor the cost on a near real-time basis by project across the company to say where we're spending money on AI. So that's how I would break it down into the three buckets.
Right. All right. Well, listen, gentlemen, that brings us to my favorite part of the show. Hopefully other people's favorite part of the show. It is time for questionable ideas. We're going to put your expertise and knowledge to the test. Questionable ideas is our tabletop exercise where our panels will serve as interim executives at the fictional company called Questionable Ideas. These scenarios were not shared in advance with our guests, and they may seem a bit over the top, but they do reflect on today's topic. As always, my guests are not responsible for the presence of goblins, kobolds, or gremlins in these scenarios. That is entirely my fault. Okay, so again, Gourav, Eddie, you will be serving as interim executives with the same exact powers and rights and privileges that you expect to have when you roll Gourav as Chief Business Officer, Eddie as CTO. And in addition to that, if you need to call in additional resources, including calling in the National Guard to deal with what the goblins and kobolds are up to, that is fine too. Okay. Eddie, Gourav, are you ready? Okay. All right. First scenario. Questionable Ideas is launching a new AI systems company-wide, which the goblins are very pleased to support. The CEO is already cheering the expected efficiencies, but after a few days, issues are emerging. The systems are fractured with errors and duplicate records, historical data that has not been remediated to be usable within new systems. And also there's a lack of standardization of business definitions for the AI to digest to be consistent. The goblins say this is an opportunity for a fast refresh. They propose clearing the table of all the troublesome old data that no one really cares about anyway. Those customers don't matter anymore. Do you support AI transformation as the goblins have planned as is, or do you want to refine and salvage a plan, or do you want to terminate their plan and start over?
I would terminate their plan immediately. It kind of goes back to, you can't AI your way out of bad data.
Well, I think there's something to be said for what the goblins are saying. we will fork. What we will do is we'll say all new things that come to us will be on the Goblin plan. And everything that is legacy and existing, the bread and butter of our company, our customers who are paying customers that we have had with us for years, they stay on the old plan. Why? Because the rate of change for them does not have to be the same way as people who are trying to create brand new processes, the new customers. So doing that fork allows us to innovate with the new customer vein, and then leave the existing customer vein while we fix things to make them more durable, because that's what pays the bills effectively, the customers that we have. And last but not the least, I'd ask the Goblins to get a good PR team to help them tell their story in a better way. And our PR team is great, so we'll have them help the Goblins out with the messaging.
Well, the Goblins definitely appreciate the opportunity to at least try and make things happen. But of course, they want to, smash, not so much necessarily smash things, but just to kind of put the accelerator down and move forward as quickly as possible. Okay, on to the next scenario. Your teams are working on the issues that arose from the initial transformation plan, and the kobolds this time have resurfaced from their data dungeons. They say the problem is not focusing on the transformation work into a concise team, that not focusing the transformation work into a concise team that can control everything is the issue. The kobolds propose overseeing the transformation with their AI specialist team with no input or explanation from other departments or managers. Even seasoned IT team members are left out of the loop. This plan seems like it will reduce issues, but much of the company will be extremely dependent on the kobolds to understand and validate the AI outputs. Do you support the kobolds plan in this, attempt to salvage and rework it, or scuttle this plan and start over?
I can go first. If someone puts forward an aggressive plan, I'm all for giving them an opportunity to succeed or fail on their own terms. And so I would not shut them down. Again, partition, protect, run a test, right? Our culture is very much an A/B testing culture. So we would give them a greenfield opportunity in which to prove themselves out before we scale it. And so, it also creates trust within the organization to say this prototype or proof of concept was able to justify, validate the stance that was being taken by said group. And then we decide how we figure out how to scale. And in the process, what we also find is the rest of the company starts to learn from the prototype that's being built, and they start shifting. Alternatively, the team that's coming up with a radical plan will learn fast from their failures on a very controlled surface. We're running the A/B test, and then we figure out how that team can adjust. So I think it's just saying no and shutting it down is not going to help anyone, but running a controlled experiment is how we would go about it.
Yeah, in this case, I would agree. I would modify it so that the COBOL output actually would go to those managers in phase one and the IT team for human in the loop, type of verifications, and do that for as long as necessary to gain confidence from all those folks and not actually, turn them the other direction or against the AI.
Again, the kobolds appreciate the opportunity to try and make their plan happen, even though they still believe that the best way is to just lock it down to one team and no one knows anything except them, because that's how they like to run things. Okay, last scenario. The gremlins finally show up when chaos is at its peak. They say it is time to make the AI transformation even more radical to really deliver ROI for the company. The AI system they want to introduce will brute force its way through every problem, regardless of broken data or the knowledge of workers in the company. They call this AI the Juggernaut, and it seems to function, but there are signs of bad workflows, flawed business processes, and questionable governance. The Juggernaut pushes workarounds regardless of the issues it faces, but the actual results are questionable and may compromise operations. The security and legal teams are already knocking at your door about this. Do you maintain the Juggernaut project as is, attempt to revise the strategy, or terminate it and start over?
I would attempt to revise immediately in that scenario for sure. You always, like Gourav and I both said earlier, you always want to test quickly and be fast and be ahead and make mistakes. But it sounds like the risk outweighs the reward here. And once again, just as Gourav was mentioning before, it needs to be tested first, and human in the loop always in the beginning in this case.
I agree. Take the risk, but in a controlled manner with the human in the loop, and open the aperture up. I think it's normal for legal and security teams to err on the side of caution. And, in their world, the paranoids are the only ones who survive. So I get it. But data collection becomes paramount. So I wouldn't shut down Juggernaut. I'd just say, okay, what's the controlled surface on which we can learn? Learn fast, adjust fast, fail forward. All of these patterns have served us really well in our history as a company. They continue to serve us well. There are so many ideas that have come up in the company where 20 people stand up and say, this cannot work, this won't work, this is too risky. We've tested it out, and more often than not, it's just a lack of clarity on what the risk really is. And it's human nature to just assume the worst would happen, which can be disproven by just collecting data in a controlled manner. And I think that is very much the culture of our company is create a surface area, run the test, collect the data, and then move fast. We will do that.
Okay. Well, the Gremlins appreciate the opportunity to have the Juggernaut still break a few things because that's what they love to see happen, because they think that's the way you see real transformation, regardless of what the actual outcome is. If it means going scorched earth, it means going scorched earth. All right, Eddie, Gourav, listen, you have navigated questionable ideas and you have provided us with great insight and input. I appreciate you coming on to the podcast today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, JP.